Many people don't believe in self-driving cars. Here are their arguments. Such cars will never be brought to the roads en masse, self-driving cars will never replace live drivers, and all in all, self-driving cars are something out of the realm of fiction. But is this really the case? Let's analyze the most popular myths on this topic. The first myth. Self-driving cars won't be able to drive without 5G. Perhaps this is the most common stereotype. Unmanned cars need fast 5G internet, and without this type of communication, self-driving cars won't be able to drive. However, self-driving cars are already driving in many countries without 5G. This communication standard is not used by Waymo, Yandex, or Tesla. Each of these companies has put their own unmanned cars on public roads in a test mode. Each has documented trips with people who didn't drive the car. And all this without a fast internet connection, but with radars, lidars and other equipment that these cars really need. At the moment, there is no single standard for the design of self-driving cars at all. And perhaps one of the developers will really create an effective solution using 5G. But right now there is no real need for this. 5G is by no means a mandatory technology for cars to work properly. Moreover, they don't even really need GPS, because it doesn't give very accurate data. The error can be up to several dozens of feet, especially in conditions of dense urban development. This is unacceptable for self-driving cars. They can't depend on such crutches, so manufacturers usually use GPS only as an auxiliary data source. And their main source is a sensor system, cameras, radars, lidars, and high-precision maps. Moreover, it's not so difficult to create and keep them up to date, since they are updated by the cars themselves. Add to this the fact that there is a trend of some technology exchange, which significantly accelerates the development of the entire industry. For example, Elon Musk's Tesla is ready to open its developments in the field of unmanned vehicles to competitors. Musk said that, it would be cool, to license Tesla's developments in the field of autonomous driving for other companies, including competing ones. A new version of the proprietary assistant complex called Full Self-Driving will debut with a serial Cybertruck car and should get about 4 times more features than the current one. There is no talk of turning Tesla's developments into open-source software yet. That means the providing of shared access to software. Elon Musk noted that the creation of such a system is extremely expensive, so you need to pay for it. Nevertheless, it is believed that the cost of acquiring a license in any case will save manufacturers who don't yet have their own autopilots. These costs will be disproportionately less than financing their own developments. And here is another example from Russia. Yandex has published the world's largest set of data collected by autonomous cars, which are used for machine learning of self-driving systems. These are records of 1,600 hours of movement of Yandex cars, that traveled across Russia, Israel, and the United States. All this data is divided into 600,000 fragments of car trips, and the information in them is depersonalized. That is, the registration plates of other cars or pedestrians' faces are not visible on the videos released to the public. At the same time, the fragments contain high-precision route maps, motion tracking of other road users, their position, speed, acceleration, and so on. Thus, the set of published data contains everything necessary to solve the problem of distributional shift in machine learning. What is a distributional shift? Imagine a simple situation. You got a driver's license in the summer, learned to drive well on dry asphalt and feel quite confident behind the wheel. But then comes winter. The roads are getting slippery, the markings are less visible under the snow, and drivers of other cars behave quite differently than in summer. And you have to adapt your skills to new, more complex conditions. Self-driving cars have to solve the same tasks, and machine learning helps to cope with them, which predicts the situation on the road based on accumulated knowledge. For example, this is the same intersection in summer and winter. In summer, drivers cross it faster and allow themselves risky maneuvers. And in winter, on a snowy road, everyone is more careful. Accordingly, the behavior model applicable in summer will work worse in winter and it needs to be adapted. Another example is driving in different cities. One of the fragments was recorded in the American city of Ann Arbor, Michigan, and the second in Moscow. There is a difference in the number of cars on the road, and in the manner of driving. And in this situation, the car also needs to be able to adapt using machine learning. The second myth. Long distances will prevent the rapid spread of self-driving cars. The second most popular stereotype is that self-driving cars will not be able to travel long distances. Skeptics see the problem in the fact that all unmanned cars will become exclusively electric in the future. Consequently, they will not have enough battery power for long distances, and it is too difficult to build the right number of charging stations in the vast landscapes of a large country. In fact, many companies that develop driverless cars have hybrid and gasoline cars in their fleet that solve this problem. Self-driving cars don't have to be electric. Contrary to the general opinion, huge distances in general can become a point of progress for unmanned cars. After all, cargo transportation is one of the ways of development of self-driving cars. In terms of technology, autonomous truck movement has advanced further than developments in the passenger segment. The third myth: self-driving cars will always be more expensive than conventional cars. Undoubtedly, an unmanned vehicle is still much more expensive than a regular one, and for some time the price difference will probably remain. But when fully autonomous cars will be able to drive on the roads, the cost of their maintenance will be able to match the maintenance of a conventional car, coupled with the driver's salary. And over time it may even become cheaper. John Kravchuk, CEO of the Waymo self-driving car developer, told in an interview how much each of the company's cars can cost. If we equip a Chrysler Pacifica minivan or an electric Jaguar I-Pace with our sensors and computers, it will cost no more than a moderately equipped Mercedes-Benz S-Class. The fourth myth: the laws will never allow self-driving cars to drive on their own. Indeed, the issue of the legality of the use of unmanned cars requires a special conversation. However, more and more states are legalizing the use of unmanned vehicles under normal conditions. In the USA, Finland, Russia, Singapore, and China, self-driving cars have already become legal in some areas, or in the whole country. Let's take a closer look at this. For example, here on this map is a self-driving Singapore. Now 620 miles of roads in the west of the country, a tenth of all streets in Singapore, are open for free testing of unmanned cars. And by 2022, the government is going to launch a regular unmanned bus service in 3 districts of the city. At the same time, the government organized a retraining program for hundreds of bus drivers. They had the opportunity to master the skills of security engineers for self-driving cars. Unlike large countries, where manufacturers primarily aimed to solve the problems of launching autonomous cargo transportation and robotaxi services, Singapore focused on driverless public transport. After all, in a small city-state there is no need for long-distance trips, and a large density of buildings doesn't leave room for parking. Therefore, Singapore with high taxes discourages the ownership of any personal transport, both gasoline and electric. At least, this is the long-term goal of the program called To Any Point in 45 Minutes, which the city announced. The ability to get from arbitrary point A to arbitrary point B in Singapore in 45 minutes should become a reality by 2040. Public unmanned transport will serve this purpose. And Norway, for example, is already using self-driving vehicles in action, though in the simplest scenarios. Right now, there are 3 short routes operating in the capital of the country, Oslo, on which unmanned buses run in test mode. Recently, their maximum speed was raised from 10 to 12 miles per hour. Another simple scenario in which unmanned transport is used, is implemented at Oslo Airport. Here, unmanned snowplows are working every day. They remove snow and ice from the runways. Several unmanned trucks travel to mining enterprises in the north of the country. They deliver goods from mines to railway stations and back, along a route of about 3 miles. There are also unmanned ferries in Norway. They run in the fjords on a regular basis. Small cargo ships independently deliver cargo at ports. Let's take a look at 2 more Scandinavian countries, Sweden and Finland. High-quality engineering education and long-term work of high-tech giants, like Nokia, Volvo, and Scania, have created greenhouse conditions in the Scandinavian countries for the development of driverless transport. Swedish startup Einride has designed a line of unmanned trucks for various tasks, from short routes to highway trips. The company not only spends, but already earns, money. But so far not on self-driving, but on manned electric trucks. And the Finnish startup Sensible 4 has teamed up with the Japanese company Muji to assemble an unmanned gacha bus, which is currently being tested in the city of Espoo near Helsinki. Unlike other countries where laws don't distinguish between manned and unmanned vehicles, in Sweden there are special speed limits for driverless cars. However, they are relatively mild. Here such cars are allowed to accelerate up to 50 miles per hour. There must be operators in the cabins, but they have the right not to touch the steering wheel. And in Finland, testing of self-driving cars is generally allowed everywhere. Forget about regulations, individual sites and areas for unmanned cars. The whole country has become a testing ground. The USA, The main thing you need to know. The United States has not signed the Vienna Convention on Road Traffic of 1968. This is the convention that obliges the driver to be inside the car while driving, which blocks the testing of self-driving cars in everyday life in many countries. The United States has not committed itself to such obligations, so now they have every right to release unmanned cars on the roads. This is happening now. In several states, self-driving cars are already allowed to move without an engineer in the cabin. A significant part of the world's news about the creation and testing of self-driving cars comes from the United States. More than 1,000 self-driving cars are being tested here, and even the first robotaxi services are being launched. On the roads of different states, you can see autonomous cars of the most successful developers from around the world. Waymo, a company that came out from Google, Chinese Baidu, and Russian Yandex. And the number of American startups in this area has already exceeded 100. In California alone, in 2019, almost 700 unmanned Waymo, GM Cruise, Baidu, AutoX, Pony AI, and WeRide cars were tested, as well as many other companies. 5 manufacturers have permission to conduct tests in the state without a safety driver: Waymo, Nuro, GM Cruise, Zoox, and AutoX. A separate story is the services of an unmanned taxi. So far, only in the USA there is a public commercial service operating in a completely autonomous mode without a safety driver, the Waymo Robotaxi in the suburbs of Phoenix, South Korea. Smart roads are a national project here. In addition to cartography, the authorities are going to provide wireless communication between cars and the curb, all along the way, an integrated traffic control system that protects against accidents, and eliminate legal restrictions on the use of unmanned cars. By 2030, all 68,350 miles of South Korean roads will be mapped. The national project also describes guidelines for the number of self-driving cars on the streets. By 2025, 9% of all cars sold in the country should have partial or full automation of movement, and by 2030 the share of such cars should grow to 54%. Along with the roads, South Korea encourages manufacturers to develop unmanned cars. The authorities of the republic have created an industrial alliance of future transport, which includes the main manufacturers of machinery and equipment. Hyundai has become a key player, starting work in several directions at once. But what about China? In a nutshell, free robotaxis and chaos on the roads. China is rightfully considered a pioneer in the issue of state regulation of self-driving cars. This is one of the first countries to introduce uniform rules for the movement of self-driving cars throughout the country. And local businesses are actively involved in the creation of autonomous cars. For example, the largest search engine Baidu at the annual conference showed a prototype of a car in which the driver's seat is not marked at all. The concept is an autonomous capsule with seagull wing-type doors, and a large multimedia system screen in place of the traditional torpedo and controls. Instead of the driver, the latest Kunlun 2 chip with artificial intelligence is responsible for driving. In total, there are more than 30 companies in China that are developing self-driving cars, and the coronavirus didn't stop them. In the first 4 months of 2020 alone, at least 10 Chinese startups received new rounds of funding. One of the most popular directions of development is robotaxi. Almost every major developer has their own robotaxi service. For example, the startup AutoX in 2020 received a license from the Shanghai authorities to use 100 unmanned vehicles for passenger transportation at once. At first, operators must be in these cars, but they are not obliged to drive the car, it is enough just to be present. Now the service is operating in test mode, and by order of the Shanghai City Hall, trips for passengers are free. Developers are also interested in China because the local traffic differs from the European and American ones. There are a lot more pedestrians and motorcycles on the roads here. This is exactly what a computer that controls a car needs. To learn how to drive properly, the system requires complex cases. The fifth myth. The technology of unmanned cars is complex and will not be finalized soon. It is generally believed that a car can have 6 levels of autonomy. 0 is a car that is completely controlled by a person, and 6 is a car that does not need a person at all. The perfect unmanned car of the future. Now all the driverless cars are located approximately between the 2nd and 3rd levels. In order to get to the top level and move ordinary cars with people at the wheel off the pedestal, self-driving cars still have a lot to learn. For example, to move in large metropolitan areas during rush hour. 1 billion unforeseen circumstances can arise in such traffic, so self-driving cars are tested in different localities and in cities with different populations. But large corporations continue to move forward the self-driving cars market. For example, in January, General Motors and Microsoft invested $2 billion in Cruise, a startup that develops unmanned taxis. This is just one example. Apparently, soon the disputes about Android and Apple smartphones will be a thing of the past. Everyone will argue which unmanned car is cooler, from Apple or from Xiaomi. The Chinese corporation intends to enter the market of self-driving cars before Apple. Xiaomi is ready to invest $1.5 billion in this project. In turn, the American company is preparing to present its electric car by 2025. Preparations are in full swing. Recently, it was reported about the transfer to Apple of former BMW top manager Ulrich Krantz. He will develop the automotive sector of the American company. Under the leadership of Krantz, BMW released the i3 electric car and the i8 hybrid. He worked for the Bavarian company for 30 years. At Apple, he will work under Doug Field, who was previously responsible for the Model 3 project at Tesla. So in the next couple of years, we are waiting for a race of unmanned transport technologies. The future is very close. After all, technologies don't develop in a second, and gradually but inevitably integrate into our lives. And who said that a person is more reliable than an unmanned car? A self-driving vehicle has no emotions and stress, no blind spots or directional focus of attention. For example, a person can focus on the side mirror and not notice what is happening right in front of the hood, and an unmanned vehicle is basically designed to simultaneously see and analyze everything that is happening around. After all, escalators and elevators are also a kind of unmanned vehicles, only simpler. But no one is surprised in the subway when the announcer says, "The escalator is a technical means of increased danger." And people are very unhappy when they have to walk on the stopped machine with their own feet. A noticeable number of self-driving cars on the roads can affect driving culture in general. People's driving style is largely determined by the specific environment. If it is customary to drive aggressively in the city, violating the rules and going 20 or more over the speed limit becomes the norm. But remember what happens if you find yourself in a city where it is not customary to break the speed limit, for example, in Finland. Very quickly, a calm driving style in a new place becomes the norm, and a resident of a metropolitan city adapts to it. Robot drivers who follow the rules can help form such an environment. So in a couple of years, an unmanned taxi may become quite a common thing. Or maybe the opportunity to buy an unmanned car at a car dealership and say to it, "Take me home," will appear not earlier than in 10 years. Let us know in the comments what you think about these predictions, and see you in future videos on our channel.